This lock has been around for over 300 years. It's simple, it's slow, and yet it's still one of the strongest locking mechanisms ever made. Why? To understand that, we need to take it apart. And while we do, we need to go back 3 centuries. The first true ancestors of this mechanism appear in Spain in the 1700s, the navalla. Originally, it didn't lock at all. It relied on friction and grip pressure. But Spanish weapon laws restricted the carrying of swords. People needed something compact, something concealable, something that would not fold under stress. So cutlers modified the backspring and the blade tang. Teeth were cut into the blade heel. A spring-loaded luck would catch each tooth as the blade opened. That mechanism, the caraca, locked the blade in place. It was effective enough that it was specifically named in the 18th century weapon edicts. The core idea was already there. A spring-loaded element engaging a blade to prevent closure. The concept spread across Europe. French, English, German cutlers all produced variations of spring-locking folders through the 18th and 19th centuries, but they shared a limitation: manufacturing tolerances. Every knife was hand-fitted. Some locked securely, some developed play. The principle worked, the execution was inconsistent. That changed in 1964. Not because the mechanism was reinvented, but because it was manufactured precisely and at scale. The Buck 110 Folding Hunter. It didn't introduce a new idea, it perfected an old one. Fine blanking allowed blade tanks and lock bars to be produced with repeatable precision. The lock engagement was no longer artisanal, it was industrial. And once you understand that history, you can see something important. The lockback didn't survive for 300 years because of marketing. It survived because mechanically it makes sense. Okay, so our little knife has been disassembled. So when you look at it, when the knife is closed, the lockback doesn't use a separate detent ball or a second spring. The lock bar itself is the detent. In this position, the backspring is pushing upward on the rear of the lock bar. The lock bar pivots around the rocker pin so that the upward force at the rear rotates the bar and creates downward pressure at the front, right here at the lock face. That lock face is sitting against the blade tang, so the knife stays closed because the lock face is being pushed down into the tang under spring tension. To start opening the knife, the blade has to overcome that detent force. As the blade rotates, the tang keeps driving against the lock face, forcing it upward. And because the lock bar is a lever, lifting the front pushes the rear down against the spring. So when opening the knife, the blade is continuously working against the spring through a lever. And here is the key difference versus most liner locks or frame locks. This isn't just a startup detent that disappears after a few degrees. On a lockback, that spring pressure provides resistance essentially all the way through the opening travel, because the lockback is riding the tang until the blade reaches full open. At full open, the locking notch finally lines up with the lock face, and the spring snaps the lock face down into that notch. So the same force you were fighting during opening arc becomes the force that holds the blade locked open. That's what's elegant about the design. The same parts that lock the knife open also keep it shut. Okay, so the real strength of a lockback does not come from the spring. It comes from the structural part that carries force. When downward force is applied to the blade, that force travels into the lock face, then into the body of the lock bar, and then into the rocker pin, and then into the liners and into the G10 scales. And this is the key component. The rocker pin is typically a solid steel pin supported on both sides by relatively thick steel liners. Under load, the lock bar bears against this pin. That means that the force is ultimately transferred into a hardened steel pin, captured between two structural steel plates. The pin is loaded primarily in shear and compression, which are directions steel handles extremely well. So instead of relying on a thin spring or a flexible liner, the lockback relies on a solid transverse steel element, anchored across the full width of the handle. Structurally, that's a very stable configuration. Notice something important about the direction of the force. The closing force is not trying to bend the lock bar sideways, it is trying to drive it deeper into engagement. Because of the geometry of the lock face and the blade tang, applied force actually increases compression between the surfaces. In other words, under load, the lock does not want to disengage, it wants to be seated more firmly. The rocker pin, by the way, also has a mechanical advantage because the lock bar sits some distance from the pivot. The load is distributed over a larger lever arm that reduces stress concentration at the engagement surface. In other words, the system spreads load rather than localizing it. You may also notice something about the engagement itself. The lock face does not completely fill the lock notch. There is often a slight angle and sometimes even a visible gap. This is not poor machining and it is not a flaw, it is deliberate. If the lock face were perfectly square and perfectly flush, even minor wear would immediately create vertical blade play. Instead, most lockbacks are cut with slightly positive engagement geometry. That means that under cutting load, the blade actually drives the lock face deeper into the notch. That force reinforces engagement. It does not try to cam the lock out of position. The goal is not a visually perfect fit. The goal is long-term mechanical stability. A lockback is designed to wear in, not to wear out. As the surfaces polish against each other, the engagement can actually become smoother while remaining secure. So, how does a lockback actually fail? Mechanically, there are only a few realistic failure modes. First is spring degradation. So the spring can weaken over time. If spring tension drops significantly, engagement pressure decreases. That doesn't immediately cause catastrophic failure, but it can reduce detent strength and make disengagement easier under shock. Second, the lock face and blade tank can wear. These are two hardened steel surfaces bearing against each other. If heat treatment is inadequate or if the geometry is incorrect, wear can change the engagement angle. Excessive wear may eventually introduce vertical blade play, but because the load is compressive, wear is typically gradual, not sudden. Third, and more structurally significant, the rocker pin can deform or loosen. Since the rocker pin carries the majority of the load, any movement there directly affects lock integrity. However, in a well-built knife, that pin is supported between two steel liners, making this mode relatively rare. And then fourth, under extreme shock, such as spine impact, the lock can momentarily unload and re-engage. But under normal cutting forces, the geometry actually reinforces engagement. The system is far more resistant to gradual cutting load than to artificial impact tests. Notice something important. None of these failure modes involve the spring holding back cutting force. The spring maintains engagement, the steel components carry the load. That separation of roles is what gives the lockback its longevity. So that was the lockback. If you're interested in how this compares to more modern locking systems, I've already broken down the compression lock. You can click the screen here, including its load path and structural differences. And if you enjoy this kind of mechanical breakdown, please consider subscribing. See you guys later.